Hi guys. Okay, so it has now been our 7 to 10 day period and things didn't quite go as I'd planned. And not always do our resin projects go to plan. So this time we thought we'd capture what went wrong, and I'm going to talk you through it because there have been a few stages since we poured and left you guys last. So what happened was, after I finished pouring and I'd tacked down our rose with our UV curing ultra cure resin, when it was submerged, the rose actually started to float, which is not what I wanted. And obviously by tacking it down with our ultra cure, it wasn't secured enough in position, even though I tipped it upside down and checked that it was secured. But some resin must have seeped under the underside and released that. So what I did was I actually got a wooden skewer. I pushed it down on the center of the rose to basically put it down to the base of the silicone mold, and then I actually MacGyvered some painter's tape over the top of it to be able to secure that skewer in. My plan was then to come back the next morning, because I'm using deep cast, it's not going to be cured, but my resin does start to thicken up, and I was going to remove that skewer and hope that I actually had my rose stay sort of submerged because the resin was a little bit thicker. So I did that. I came back the next morning, I removed the skewer successfully, and it gets a little bit sticky because a little skin starts to form on the top of the deep cast, but I managed to sort of get that off without sort of much mess, and you know, started tidying up. Come an hour later, my rose started to float again, which I wasn't happy with. So at this point, it meant that if I wanted my rose submerged, I actually had to secure it in there and leave whatever I was securing it in there while I was curing. So I decided to make, instead of using a wooden skewer, I decided to make one with our Ultra Cure, which is our UV curing resin, and basically make a translucent skewer, so to speak. So I did that. Made it a few centimeters, about 5 centimeters, 6 centimeters long. I again pushed it back through the center of the rose bud itself, and then to put my tape back on it. So the plan was, because it is resin that I was embedding and pushing the rose back down with, that you would barely be able to see it once the resin was cured. Then I would just sand the top side. So that's what I did. I basically let that then sit for my 7 days. Once that was cured, I demolded my rose, and then on the top side, I did have, obviously where my UV resin skewer was sticking out, I had some imperfections because I tried to push that rose back down when our deep cast resin was starting to thicken up. So I had some imperfections with the skin on the top, and some little bubbles where I'd moved the rose and pushed it back down. And again, because the resin was starting to thicken up at that point, it has trapped some little minor bubbles. So from that point, after demolding, the top side of the silicone mold, I sanded back with 120 grit, then 240 grit, and then applied a very thin coating, basically a dome coat of our Resi Clear, in order to save this piece. I do have some imperfections if you look up closely with regards to very fine bubbles, and you can just see where I put the UV resin skewer if you look closely. But all in all, the sides and the base of what was demolded from the silicone mold actually look pretty good. So I've saved the piece, so to speak. But while I was doing this, because this happened sort of straight away, I thought there must be another way to embed a rose and not have to deal with sort of tacking it down. What about suspending it and using a different mold? So I tried that. And what I came up with was basically our pyramid mold. And I did this while I was on a live, and I want you guys to refer to my YouTube short to be able to have a look at this and see how I've done it. But I've put a top coating on it, and I thought I'm going to demold it here for you guys today. I used the same method. I used a Ultra Cure UV resin skewer, so to speak. But again, I did have some slight issues with this. I poured quite deep. It was a very warm day, and I wasn't able to monitor it over the weekend, and my UV resin skewer, instead of sitting and suspending straight, actually warped a little bit. So I'm going to demold it, see how it looks, but this is another method. So take a look at our short for this one. But in the meantime, let's get it out and let's see what it turned out like. Oops. Ew. My silicone had suctioned right to the base of my framework here, my plastic framework. Okay, let's demold. Wow. Now I must say, this method does look pretty epic. I've got a few little bubbles trapped on the inside of my rose, which I thought might happen when I have it basically suspended upside down and fill up around it. Some oxygen has sort of been trapped there. But I put on the base, the bottom layer, we put in a layer of our silver diamond holographic glitter, which looks pretty epic. And apart from that, that was one solid pour of our deep cast. So that is another way to manage embedding a flower piece, especially when it's a really special piece, something like your Valentine's roses. So guys, I hope you've learned a little bit from this. Sometimes mistakes happen, and this is one of those occasions, but it isn't always the case. So definitely get in there and try it again if you do have a muck up like that and end up with a better piece again. So thanks for watching. Make sure if you've got any comments, leave them below, and like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.